Hello everybody and welcome back to my mind. It's Danielle here. This weekend was pretty special for me. It was very full circle in the sense that I presented with a panel at the IOCD National Conference right here in Denver. And I don't know, the gratitude, the inspiration, the wonderful feeling I got by presenting and being there was something special. I just never thought I would be able to A, talk about my story, and B, be a part of something that's going to affect other people in a positive light. So it was really cool. I'm going to actually give my part right here, right now. Me and my panel, and I, are going to actually have a meeting in a month, and we're going to talk about it all. And so it's going to be out there. It wasn't actually recorded at the conference, but in the interim, I'm going to talk about my part and just share, because I know I had some friends and family that were interested in what I talked about. So our talk was on OCD in sport, and we had 4 of us, and we had someone talk about a little bit of research regarding OCD in sport, someone talking about the difference between superstition and OCD in sport, because obviously athletes do have rituals and things they need to do, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's just a huge difference. And then the other person talked about going through ERP treatment while playing a sport. And then my part was about why it all even matters and how to stay in the driver's seat once you do go through ERP treatment. And for those of you who don't know on this channel, ERP treatment is and I've never done a video on that, so I probably will now that I'm kind of all over the board right now. But ERP stands for exposure response prevention, and it's the gold standard when treating OCD. I went through a 16-week treatment program. A lot of people go through a treatment program with ERP because it's the most effective in treating OCD. Now, it doesn't rid OCD. I still have OCD. However, it teaches you how to live an exposure lifestyle so you don't feel trapped because of your OCD. So anyway, why does it all matter? How do we focus on what we actually want to achieve in life once we've gone through ERP treatment? And specifically for athletes, I know that from my experience working with athletes and talking to athletes and being an athlete myself in the past, and kind of an adult athlete now. I mean, I do have a volleyball tournament this weekend, but anyway, that's beside the point. The most successful athletes are passionate and have the ability to be an effective teammate. So there's a couple definitions for passion, but I feel like the one that resonates with me the most is a strong liking or desire. And I feel like when you play a sport and have OCD, you don't play for your passion. OCD tells you to play to avoid your fear. For example, you are only playing, like if you have a fear of harming yourself and that's all you think about pre-game and you have an intrusive thought, you're not going to be playing because you love that. You're going to be playing to get rid of that thought, and then you're going to continue on with the next play. So at what point do we realize that we're playing for OCD or playing for the strong liking or desire, our passion? So that's what I challenge people, and this is something I want athletes to go back to, especially specifically athletes with OCD, to go back to the drawing board. Identify 3 reasons that you even play your sport. And these reasons can stem from your everyday values. And you can identify your values in life, because I think in general, when you have OCD, you don't live for your values, you live for the OCD and what the OCD is going to do to your life or yourself or someone you love or whatever your fear is. So just personally, 3 of my everyday life values are connections with humans, health, and laughter and joy. Those are my just 3 of my in no particular order. But that kind of helped me identify, after I got treatment, how do I live again. Like where do I start? Because I wasn't living for any of that to start with. And I've had a talk on my YouTube channel about values before. So as I said before, how when you're going through a dark period of OCD and you are an athlete, you literally are succumbing to whatever the OCD asks you to do. And you don't, if you're on a team sport or an individual sport, you're not an effective teammate at that time. So after you go through your ERP treatment, how do you become an effective teammate? And I think that's done, I've kind of chalked it up to 4 different ways. And the first one is communicate. I think that communication comes in various forms. The first level, I think the most basic foundational level of communication is communicate to your partner that you're going to get the ball. Like literally call the ball. That's a basic thing, right? Another example of that is, I'm just trying to think. Another example is text your coach that you're going to be late for practice, right? That's communication. Another example in an athlete setting is tell your coach in advance that you're not going to be at the end of your tournament, right? These are foundational level of communication ideas. Then I feel like there's another level, which is more an intellectual, a deeper level. And I feel like this comes from a place of vulnerability. To communicate in this next level, you have to be a bit more vulnerable, right? And in order to be vulnerable, you have to trust people. And trust doesn't come easy for everyone. I know it didn't come easy for me back when I was an athlete in college, I never played in college. I meant to say in high school. Back when I was an athlete in high school, I hid my OCD from everyone. I didn't really trust any of my teammates to tell them. So that's just an example of not being able to trust someone. So I think that's something I aim as a coach now, just a sports performance coach, whether my athlete has OCD, anxiety, eating disorder, whatever it is, like I want to build a place of trust for them so they can talk to me and be vulnerable and be open with me if they're having something going on. So back to being an effective teammate, another one is participate and another one is celebrate. I like to link these two together sometimes because participate when you don't want to and celebrate when it's not your own success. I think these are very important ways to be an effective teammate. I had an athlete who was a prime example of this, who didn't have her best season, but yet she was able to celebrate and cheer and be that effective teammate for her other teammates. So there's ways you can work on your own stuff, but I'm talking about like after you've gone through treatment, like to realize, what do I need to do to be an effective teammate? And then the fourth thing I've chalked it up to is grit. And for me, I really believe that grit is done by persevering when you're uncomfortable. It's just simple as that. That's what it takes to be a teammate. And I know a lot of people can relate to that who have OCD. Maybe you can relate if you don't have OCD. The talk was actually done for a lot of people for coaches or athletes who have OCD. But even if you don't, like, persevere when you're uncomfortable. That is huge. You're not going to feel your best every time you jump out on the court. You might have anxiety that day, but the fact that you continue on, the fact that you still run your race that day, like those are examples of persevering when you're uncomfortable. And that's what it takes to be an effective teammate. Maybe you've never played this team before and you're like, I don't want to play them. They're going to annihilate us, but you still show up and play. So those are examples of being an effective teammate. And then how to live a life beyond just as an athlete, beyond a sport. Like yes, you can be an athletic person, but there's comes to a point where you're not always competing and you're not always, involved in tournaments and whatnot. So I feel like this is where personal strength comes in after you go through ERP treatment. And I just want to share a little bit about my own personal strength after I went through ERP treatment And now I'm able to, do athletic things as an adult. The moment I surrendered to my OCD thoughts, I gained a newfound feeling for my abilities as a person, coach, and family member. And I really realized that my journey has a purpose and I don't just exist anymore. Like, that was the biggest thing, is I just existed for way too many years. Way too many years I was just existing. I literally did not know what I was alive for. And honestly, I felt like I lived in a cage, like a bird cage, where you could put your hand out and you could feel or see other options, but you couldn't actually get out there. It was like a glimpse. Anytime I had a great moment, I was like, wow, this is what it feels like. But then I would have to just go back and succumb to my compulsions or rituals. And if I didn't do that, I was a bad person. God was going to kill my mom, or my mom was going to die in a car crash. And I just lived like that in a cycle of false prayer, I guess I could call it, where I'm not going to get into each compulsion I had at the moment. I've done that in the past. But the point is, I didn't live. I was just seeing glimpses of living. And I feel like my highs were so high and my lows were so low. I could never find a middle ground. I wasn't able to just ride the waves. And it was hard because my lows were so low that suicidal ideation was a common theme in my life. And to be honest, attempting suicide was way too common. And the moment that didn't work for me, the moment I lived and realized what the hell am I doing, that's when I was like, okay, I am here. I am not meant to die. I am not meant to die. My mom's not dying. And it just struck a chord with me. And I think that's where personal strength comes in, after your ERP treatment, where it's dang, I lived, I am here. I got through my OCD. I got through whatever I may have thought I couldn't get through. So I just want to explain, for me, life when OCD won and life when I win now, the differences in small examples of my personal story. When life when OCD won, there's two things about this. I avoided social events for several years because I knew that I wasn't going to be present if I went out. I knew that I was in such a vulnerable state. I knew that if I went somewhere, I would have to spend more time ritualizing, praying, doing my compulsions. A lot of my compulsions were mental compulsions. So I may have been physically there, but mentally I was doing my routine until it was perfect in my mind. And if it wasn't perfect, I had to restart. Otherwise, that was going to kill my mom. So, why would I do that? And then another second part to this is, before I actually realized that it would take too long, I used to use alcohol as a way to suppress my OCD behaviors, and that would get rid of the thoughts for that night. So I would either suppress them or just avoid at all costs. So now life when I win. I am so eager to plan things. I have been living, I know it's so cheesy, living my best life, but literally I am living my best life now because I live for a purpose. I live because I'm living my values. I'm living to laugh. I'm living to have fun. I'm living for joy. I'm living to help people. I'm so eager to do social things with people and be around people. It's night and day. Life when OCD won, my soul was trapped. So I talked about being trapped a lot. I was raised in a Jewish household, not super religious, but Reformed Judaism. And I never connected with it. And as my OCD got significantly worse, I started to develop religious scrupulosity, which is another subset of OCD. And this is where you believe you're immoral, or someone you believe in is immoral. Or for me, these are just examples, but for me personally, I believed that, how do I even put it in words? I believe that if I didn't do the right thing, that God would hate me and God would spite me and God would kill my mom. And I believed that if I used God's name in vain, which I had intrusive thoughts about God and negative things about God, then I was a bad person. So for the longest time, I had no relationship with God. I like pushed anything related to religion away. It was really tough because I knew, and what the reason I brought this up is because I knew in my soul that's not what I wanted. I knew that I wanted to feel a connection. I've always had a connection with the universe and nature and God, and I didn't have it for so long, and I didn't want anything to do with Judaism. I didn't know any other religion, so I was like, nope, absolutely not. I won't do any holidays. Like, I would get so much anxiety if I went to synagogue with my family. Like, the word God would like freak me out. So it was tough, and I hated that because I knew there was something else for me. And now I am so happy and proud and content to say that, like, God and I found each other again. And it's been one of the most special 6 months figuring that out, and I have never felt closer to God. And it has nothing to do with OCD or Judaism. It's just like my faith in a higher power and my gratitude. Like, I am so grateful, and I literally, it's just night and day from when OCD won and from when I win. So I could do a whole nother YouTube on religious scrupulosity because it's very intense. It's really real and deep. So another example in life when OCD won, I could not accept change or defeat, like not even to the slightest. Excuse me. When I had anything that changed, I was so afraid that I was going to create new I didn't want it, but I had a fear of like intrusive thoughts creating. So I would just try to avoid anything. And when change did happen, I had to create new rituals and new routines because something would pop up, and then I would have to save that person and say sorry to that person and tell that person that I care about them, because if I didn't, like, they would die, and it would drive me nuts. Any type of change, like when my boyfriend and I broke up at the time, like, that was me. I literally blamed OCD for everything. Any change, I was like, oh, you know what? It's because I have OCD, and that's why I can't accept this. And, you know, I had a boyfriend who actually cared about me and my OCD for once. He literally came to therapy with me. He read books and I still blamed the fact that I have OCD that we ended. And obviously that wasn't the case, but that's just an example of how I couldn't accept change. Another example of how I couldn't accept defeat. I didn't get into a sports management program because I literally couldn't finish the exam prep test because I blamed my OCD. I never could finish tests in college. I was on academic probation my first year because anytime I took a test, I was bound by reading the question. I had different numbers that were relevant at that time. They always changed, but if I didn't read it a certain amount of times, then my mom was going to die, and I had to do that. And so it's just like anything that didn't work out for me was because I had OCD. Now, when I win now, life without OCD, I don't know why I just said that. Life when I win, not without it. I still have OCD. I just let things go that don't serve me anymore. It's like unreal. I never thought I could get to this place. I mean, yeah, I get anxiety still and I get upset about things, but I'm like, and this is also now my new connection with God, is like, I seriously feel like everything is meant to happen for a reason. I know, as cliche as that sounds, like divine intervention is real, and if it didn't work out for me, it didn't work out for a reason, and I'm not bound and blaming OCD because of it. I just know that, like, that wasn't meant to be. And like, if I put in my best effort and I live by my values every day, then that is what is important, not about the fact that I didn't pass the exam or something like that. So life when OCD one, another thing is I was so angry. I was angry with my family. Just a little backstory. My first onset of OCD started when I was about 10 or 11. And this is the same time that my mom had Bell's palsy. And for those of you who don't know what Bell's palsy is similar to a stroke where you lose all function on one side of your face, but it's just on your face instead of your whole body. And it may come back and it may not. As we know, OCD is biological, but also from learned behavior and from triggering events that are traumatic. So yes, biologically, there's a percent. We don't know what percent. I'm predisposed chemically. I have OCD in my brain. However, that was a very triggering event for me when my mom got Bell's palsy. I didn't know that was at the time, but like I've done a lot of reflection and work to realize that. And so back to why I was angry with my family, I felt like I wasn't angry with my mom that she got Bell's palsy. I just knew my mom was the one who took me to my therapy at the beginning. And then I know that I don't know if my brother was very involved or not, but I know I had my dad and brother didn't quite get it. Not intentionally, and this is how a lot of people are, and that's why we're doing so much push on education. And I know that some things were said that were hurtful, and so I had a lot of anger about that. And I literally have the best relationship with my dad right now. With my dad, I'm like a daddy's girl, but I think that pent up, I was like mad that certain people in my family didn't understand. And then later on in my 20s, I was going through it more so, like the treatment. Well, I was going to therapy and treatment, and I didn't open up. So a lot of it's on me. I didn't share, and I didn't want anybody, and this goes on to another point, is like, I don't think anyone could understand. So I didn't open up about it. And I had a lot of anger about like people not getting it and family members not getting it. And I just felt like very different from my family. So I didn't share with any of them. And like now as I've gone through ERP treatment, I educate my family. I share with them. I'm vulnerable with them. I've told my dad. I've told my brother about it. I mean, they don't know every detail, but the point is like, I don't let it offend me anymore, especially like, for example, when people use this is just another example of me being angry, is when people use OCD as an adjective, like, oh, I'm so OCD, I like that organized. Like, that used to really piss me off to the point where I didn't know how to handle it, and I would just get even more mad and more retreated. But now I just like ask questions and like, hey, what's your OCD fear? Or what do you have? And maybe they don't have OCD and they don't even know. So I just, teach or educate. And I'm like, hey, if you're actually interested in what OCD is, I'd be happy to share with you. So I think that's like the biggest thing is I'm more vulnerable now. I share with others about it. If you want to ask me a question, I'm open. And that was huge. And I'm not discrediting any of my family members because I know they love me deep down, and I don't want them to feel guilty for not being there earlier or whatever they may feel, because that's not the case. Like it was a me issue where I couldn't talk about it, and it was a me issue where I was so closed off, and it was a me issue where I chose to be a victim. And that brings me into my next point is life when OCD one. I was such a victim. I literally, like I said earlier, I blamed everything for my OCD. I honestly was way more comfortable being a victim than getting help. I just felt like this is the way I am. I'm going to have all these rituals. I'm going to fear my parents are going to die. I'm going to fear that I'm not a good enough person. I'm going to fear that God hates me. I'm going to have all these irrational fears for the rest of my life. I'm going to fear that like I need to figure out a way to die before my parents. Like these were so irrational, and it plagued me. It took over me, and it was easier just like being like, oh, that's my OCD. I'm a victim, and like you don't get it. I have OCD, and now I'm like, life when I win is like, yeah, I talk about it now, but not for the victim mentality, because I know there's someone out there that's going through the same thing. I actually had a conversation with a mental health coach today who has an athlete with OCD, and like that, she saw my post from the conference and she reached out to me, and like that conversation I had with her today is the reason I'm here. And like that's the kind of mindset I have now versus like, oh, I'm a victim, I have OCD, no one can help me, you don't get it, I'm gonna be rude to my whole family. Like that's not it anymore. It's like now I'm open, I want to share, I want to be a leader, I want to be the coach that my athletes expect me to be. You know what I mean? Like that's now life when I win. And that is the most important part about like how to live fulfilled. Like I heard someone say this weekend at one of the talks is like, when you have OCD, you're functioning. Like that's not the point. Like that is actually a incredible thing that like there's so many high functioning OCD sufferers, and accepting of that like negative way to function. And that's now like once you go through your treatment, it's like we don't want to just function. Like what is that? Like what to what point are you just like functioning, living every day? And that's why I love life so much. Like that combined with like my blood clot and me not wanting to live and me attempting to not live, like all of those things combined brought me to this point where I'm like, damn, I am here for a reason, and that is so special to me. And so when it comes to like having OCD as an athlete and having all your OCD while you're playing, I just want athletes to remember that like there's going to be more besides just playing your sport, and there's going to be more after like you get through your treatment. So that's kind of a summary of my part of the talk. I might have like added more or whatnot, but like when I get going about it, like damn, I'm passionate. So I just appreciate you all listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and we will be back, because after a conference, you know how like the woo-woo passion just like it stays super high for a while. I'm gonna try to maintain that, and I know I go through ebbs and flows of posting. Obviously life is life, but I appreciate you all, and thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great day.